The deadliest threats in nature are never the big, toothy, clawed beasts. The truly dangerous ones are the things you cannot even see. They are smaller than a sesame seed. They hide on your pets, in the grass outside your building, in the rice you just bought, and even inside that plate of sashimi you love. Today, let's go through them, those invisible killers right next to you. First one. You absolutely cannot guess what causes the most hospitalizations and even deaths from wild animals in the United States every year. It is not bears. It is not snakes. It is not wolves. It is ticks. Let me first tell you a true story, so you know just how terrifying this thing really is. In July 2019, in Surry County, North Carolina, 5 cows died for no apparent reason. The farmer called the police, thinking it was poaching. The vet examined them and found the cause acute anemia, their blood sucked dry by ticks. On the body of one young bull, there were over 1,000 ticks clinging to it. Can you imagine? A bug smaller than a sesame seed, along with several thousand of its companions, drained a bull weighing over 1,000 pounds alive. And to deal with you, it only takes one. The culprit is the Asian longhorn tick. It was first discovered in the United States in West Virginia in 2010, and has now spread to at least 67 counties. The most terrifying thing about this tick is that it can reproduce through parthenogenesis, no mating needed. One female can create an entire population by itself. But the one that actually makes you unable to eat red meat is its relative, the lone star tick. In 2024, the United States reported its first confirmed death from alpha-gal syndrome. A 47-year-old pilot from New Jersey was bitten by a tick during a summer camping trip, and later ate a hamburger, and collapsed hours later, and died. His immune system was permanently rewritten by the tick. From then on, eating a single bite of pork, beef, or lamb would cause his body to react like being bitten by a venomous snake's swollen throat, breathing difficulty, and a sudden drop in blood pressure. CDC data shows that between 2010 and 2022, there were more than 110,000 suspected cases of alpha-gal syndrome in the United States. The actual number of people affected could be as high as 450,000. Each year, there are about 15,000 new suspected cases. What makes your scalp crawl even more is that you cannot feel the bite at all. A tick's saliva contains its own anesthetic. When it pierces you, you are completely unaware. It can stay attached to you for several days, swelling from the size of a sesame seed to the size of a grape, and then drop off on its own. From beginning to end, you never know it was there. By the time you do know, it may already be too late. The vast majority of people have a fatal misconception. They think ticks jump down from trees onto people. That is completely wrong. Ticks cannot fly, cannot jump, and cannot even run fast. Its hunting method is at the level of a top-tier predator. It waits by the roadside. It climbs to the very top of a blade of grass, hooks its back legs firmly onto the stem, stretches its front legs high up, and stays motionless in ambush. On its front legs there is an organ called Haller's organ, which is like a built-in biological radar. It can accurately detect your exhaled carbon dioxide, your body odor, and even the heat radiation from your body temperature from a long distance away. When you pass by it, the sticky pads at the tips of its front legs instantly lock on, and it silently climbs onto your body. Then, it does not bite right away. It first does a full-body reconnaissance. It spends several hours crawling slowly on your skin, specifically looking for the thinnest skin, the densest blood vessels, and the most inaccessible places: armpits, groin, scalp, and behind the ears. Once it finds the right spot, It first uses its hooked jaws to cut open the skin, and then drives its barbed mouthparts deep in. These barbs are like rows of fishhooks, making it very hard to pull out once they are embedded. It also secretes a biological cement that directly welds its mouthparts to your skin. As it bites, its saliva carries an anesthetic and an immunosuppressant. The wound does not become red, swollen, painful, or itchy. Your body does not detect the foreign invasion at all. In this way, it can stay on you for several days. You might never find it from start to finish. And after it leaves, the real nightmare has just begun. CDC data from the United States shows that about 476,000 people receive treatment for Lyme disease each year. 476,000. What does that number mean? It is larger than the entire population of the state of Alaska. Every year, just because of one single bug, the equivalent of a whole city's population needs to go to the hospital. And that is only Lyme disease. Ticks transmit more than 16 diseases, from babesiosis to anaplasmosis, each of which can put you in the hospital for several weeks. What is even more concerning is that CDC epidemiologists have publicly admitted that the actual infection numbers for Lyme disease are severely underestimated, because many people bitten by ticks have no idea they were bitten. As you are reading this, there might even be one on your own body, just not yet engorged, not yet making you itch. Let us also look at the spread speed of ticks. Data from the U.S. Geological Survey shows that 50 years ago, ticks were mainly concentrated in a few northeastern states. Now, they have spread to more than 50% of all counties across the United States. They advance northward by about 3 to 5 miles each year. Behind this is a factor that cannot be ignored: global warming. Research from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency shows that for every 1 degree Celsius increase in winter temperature, the overwintering survival rate of ticks rises by about 20%. The more frequent the warm winters, the more the tick population explodes. In 2019, an ecologist in New Hampshire said something in an interview that made my heart skip a beat. He said, "My children play in our own backyard now, and I do a full body check on them every single time. I never worried about this when I was a kid." The core of that statement is not panic, it is change. Ticks are redefining what safety means in Americans' backyards. There is also a piece of trivia that most people do not know. A tick's life cycle is extremely long. A tick only eats 2 or 3 meals in its entire life, but between each meal it can wait for several years. Under laboratory conditions, some adult ticks have survived completely without feeding for 4 to 5 years. They reduce their metabolism to nearly zero and lie dormant under the leaf litter like a speck of dust. They resist severe cold, tolerate drought, and can survive being submerged in water for 2 to 3 days. Think flushing it down the toilet solves the problem? It can even climb back up the pipes. So eliminating ticks is not a one-time battle, it is a long-term war. Scientists are now researching a new type of tick vaccine that targets these anesthetic and immunosuppressive substances in tick saliva. If human bodies can be made to produce antibodies in advance, then when a tick bites you, it will no longer be invisible. Your immune system will detect it immediately and clear it as a foreign invader. But the vaccine will still take at least a few more years to reach the market. Before that, there are only 2 things we can do. First, physical isolation. Second, timely inspection. If these 2 steps are done properly, 95% of the risk can be avoided. At this point, do not panic either. Once you understand its habits, prevention is actually very simple. First, when going into grassy or wooded areas, wear light-colored long sleeves and long pants, and tuck the cuffs into your socks. Second, take a shower as soon as you return from the outdoors and focus on checking your scalp, behind your ears, your neck, and your armpits. Third, if you do get bitten, take a pair of fine-tipped tweezers. Grip the tick as close to the skin as possible at the head and mouth parts, and pull straight upward at a steady, even speed. After removal, disinfect the wound with iodine. Over the next month, if you develop an unexplained fever, a bullseye-shaped rash, or muscle aches, go to a doctor immediately. Alright, that is the first killer in the grass. But as terrifying as ticks are, at least they are on your body, and you can still find them. The next killer is even more insidious. It hides where you would never expect, and you have no idea you are eating it. Having covered the killer in the grass, let us talk about something in the green spaces around your apartment building. In July 2022, Pasco County, Florida, issued a quarantine order. The reason was the discovery of the giant African snail, an invasive species that can grow to the size of an adult fist and carries a deadly parasite. Some of the snails captured were confirmed to be carrying rat lungworm, a parasite that can cause meningitis in humans. You might not know, but this quarantine in Pasco County was the third time in Florida's history that a quarantine zone had been specifically designated for the giant African snail. The first time was in 1966 in Miami. A little boy brought back 2 giant African snails as pets from a vacation in Hawaii and kept them in his backyard. Those 2 escaped, and within 3 years, more than 18,000 giant African snails had overrun all of Miami-Dade County. The Florida state government spent millions of dollars and took a full 10 years to completely eradicate them. That was the first successful eradication of the giant African snail in human history. The second time was from 2011 to 2021, again in Miami-Dade County. This time, people were illegally trading giant African snails in the pet market, and they escaped again. This round was even worse. More than 168,000 snails were collected over 10 years, costing $24 million. In October 2021, the authorities declared eradication successful. These are the only 2 successful eradication cases of this pest anywhere in the world, both in southern Florida. Then came the 2022 Pasco County case. This time, what was even more troubling was that the snails discovered were confirmed to be carrying rat lungworm. That means it is not only a crop killer, but also a public health threat. So just how dangerous is rat lungworm? Let me explain it clearly. Its full scientific name is Angiostrongylus cantonensis. Its life cycle is complex. Adult worms live in the pulmonary arteries of rats, and eggs are passed out in rat feces. Snails eat the rat feces, and the larvae enter the snail. Then a person touches the snail, eats undercooked snail, or eats lettuce that a snail has crawled over, and the larvae enter the human body. Once inside, the larvae travel through the bloodstream, with their ultimate goal being the brain. They invade the central nervous system, causing eosinophilic meningitis. Symptoms include severe headache, neck stiffness, nausea, vomiting, sensitivity to light, and fever. If there are many larvae or treatment is delayed, it can cause permanent neurological damage, paralysis, blindness, or even death. A study from the University of Hawaii pointed out that in tropical and subtropical regions, snail-related meningitis cases are increasing year by year. The main reason is not that there are more snails, but that urban expansion has brought humans and snails closer together. In the past, you would not run into giant African snails on the street because they stayed in farmland. Now they are right there in the flower beds outside your front door. If you live in any of the southern states, Florida, Texas, Louisiana, Hawaii, your chances of seeing a giant African snail are much higher than you imagine. The Florida Department of Agriculture even has a dedicated page on its website titled "Report a Giant African Snail," encouraging residents to report sightings. Many people ask, does this thing have natural predators in the United States? Yes, but not enough. Raccoons, opossums, and skunks occasionally eat them, and some birds peck at the juveniles. But the giant African snail has a thick shell, mucus, and a pungent smell predators simply cannot keep up. Predators eat 100 of them, and it can produce 1,000 more. Spraying pesticides would harm native predators, and biological control lacks effective methods. So the core strategy for dealing with a giant African snail is summed up in 2 words: quarantine. Find one area, quarantine it, and clear it. But it always comes back. Therefore, protection by residents themselves is very important. If you see this kind of snail in your yard, do not show any mercy. Salt it, seal it, and throw it in the trash. These 3 steps work better than anything else. Do not stomp on it, either crushing it will spread the parasites in its slime over a larger area of ground. Why is the giant African snail so hard to deal with? First, it is hermaphroditic. Any 2 that meet can mate and reproduce. Even more terrifying, it can mate once and produce eggs for life. Sperm is stored inside the body for years and fertilized in batches. One adult snail can lay 5 to 6 egg masses per year, each containing 150 to 300 eggs. Second, it has one of the largest numbers of teeth of any animal. Its radula contains about 25,000 tiny, sharp teeth. It can not only eat vegetable leaves, but can even scrape cement and lime off walls to supplement its calcium. Third, its diet includes more than 500 plant species, from vegetables to flowers to trees. There is almost nothing it will not eat. If you find a giant African snail near your home, remember 2 things you must never do. Do not touch it directly with your bare hands, and do not stomp on it. The correct way to handle it: sprinkle salt on it, which quickly dehydrates and kills it. Then seal it in a bag and throw it in the trash. Alright, having covered the threats on land, let us talk about something hiding inside a fish's mouth. When you open the mouth of a marine fish, what you might see is not its throat, but a complete, living crustacean. It anchors itself to the floor of the mouth with 7 pairs of hooked legs, precisely occupying the position of the original tongue. As long as the host lives, it stays there. It is called Cymothoa exigua, commonly known as the tongue-eating louse. It is the only known parasite in the world that completely replaces a host organ. Its parasitic process is as precise as a pre-designed surgery. The juvenile enters through the fish's gills, first attaches to the gill filaments, and feeds on blood to develop. Once mature, it migrates to the mouth and settles at the base of the tongue. Then it continuously sucks blood from the local area of the tongue, cutting off the blood supply day by day. Without blood, the tongue gradually atrophies and disappears entirely. Then it attaches its own body to the floor of the mouth, perfectly filling the position of the missing tongue. From the outside, it looks like an artificial tongue with eyes, a hard shell, and legs. If the fish loses its tongue, will it not die? No. In most bony fish, the tongue's function is simple: holding food and pushing it toward the throat. The tongue-eating louse sits in the same position and mechanically performs the same function. In a study conducted in Mexican waters, researchers examined 691 Pacific red snappers, of which 165 were parasitized by the tongue-eating louse, and found 236 adult parasites. The infection rate was about 24%. This data comes from a scientific paper published in 2015 in the Journal of Parasitology. The 236 adults all point to one fact: this is not a rare event, but a stable, functioning ecosystem. In certain sea areas, if you randomly catch a snapper, there is a 1 in 4 chance that something is living in its mouth. The study also found a more interesting pattern. Parasitized fish tended to be smaller and slower than unparasitized ones. The researchers proposed 2 possible explanations. One is that smaller, slower fish are naturally more vulnerable to invasion because they have weaker defenses and a narrower range. The other is more unsettling, that the parasite, over time, may drain the host's energy and reduce its mobility, making it even weaker. The weaker the fish, the more it depends on the parasite to conserve its energy. These 2 explanations may both be true, but no matter which one is true, this pattern is more complex than we think. Between the tongue-eating louse and its host, there is a gray zone that sits somewhere between parasitism and mutualism. The host does not benefit directly, but it does not die immediately either. The louse does not need to kill the host, and the host cannot get rid of the louse. They just coexist. How does the tongue-eating louse reproduce? This is another place where you have to admire nature's clever design. It is a protandrous hermaphrodite. All juveniles invade as males. Once the environment inside the host's mouth is stable, the largest male will switch to female, while later arriving smaller individuals remain male. The fish's oral cavity and gill chamber become both their habitat and their breeding ground. The female carries eggs and larvae in a brood pouch on its ventral side. When the larvae mature, they are released into seawater, disperse with ocean currents, and look for the next host. This reproductive strategy ensures that in each parasitized host's mouth, there is at most 1 female and several males. There is no competition between 2 females, and no deadlock where all are males. This precise sex ratio regulation is extremely rare among parasitic organisms. Going back to the data, 691 fish with 165 parasitized, a 24% infection rate. The infection rates vary greatly between fish species. Pacific red snapper had 24%, while some other snapper species in certain studies had rates as low as single digits and others as high as 35% or more. Infection rates are influenced by multiple factors: water temperature, depth, host age, host density, and more. In waters warmed by the Gulf Stream, the distribution density of the tongue-eating louse is significantly higher than in cold current areas. So the study of the tongue-eating louse is not just a quirky piece of trivia. It is also a natural experimental system for studying marine ecology, climate change, and host-parasite coevolution. By analyzing its distribution and infection rate changes, scientists can indirectly infer subtle shifts in the marine environment. Let me emphasize again, the tongue-eating louse is completely harmless to humans. It does not infect humans, does not carry human diseases, and even if you accidentally ate a fish-carrying one, it would not survive your stomach acid. So we talk about it to marvel at the wonders of evolution, not to cause panic. Having covered the marine world, let us talk about something in your kitchen. Have you ever noticed that a few days after you buy rice, suddenly there are small black bugs in the container? Most people's first reaction is the rice went bad, and the store sold me spoiled goods. Then they throw the whole bag away. Today I'm going to tell you you are throwing away the wrong thing. This little bug is called the rice weevil. It does not bite people, does not spread disease, and spends its entire life eating only pure grains. In fact, it is a natural quality inspector. For rice, it only goes after rice with low pesticide residues and minimal chemical processing. The rice weevil had already set up home inside the grain, while the rice was still growing in the field. The female bores a tiny hole in the husk, inserts an egg, and then secretes a plug to seal the hole. Once dry, that plug has almost the same reflectivity as the grain itself. Even optical color sorters cannot detect it. And there is more. A female rice weevil lays only 1 egg per grain. Not out of kindness, but survival law. If 2 larvae hatch inside the same grain, when food runs out, they will cannibalize each other, and only the strongest survives. This 1 egg per grain strategy is called single egg inoculation in entomology. Before laying, the female uses her mouthparts to carefully measure the size of the grain to determine whether this grain contains enough nutrients to support 1 larva to adulthood. If the grain is too small or lacks nutrition, she will not lay at all. Only when the grain is plump and nutritionally sufficient will she drill, lay, and seal. How much energy does 1 grain provide for a larva? About 0.1 grams of starch, 0.02 grams of protein, and trace amounts of fats and minerals. This nutrition has to sustain the larva through hatching, pupation, and emergence. If the grain is shrunken or damaged, the larva may starve to death mid-development. So the female's selection process is actually a precise nutritional assessment. Many people, upon seeing weevils in their rice, immediately sun-dry it, but that is completely counterproductive. Sun-drying does not kill the eggs deep inside the grain. It only dries out the rice, ruins its texture, and the higher temperature actually speeds up egg hatching. The correct method is freezing. At -18 degrees Celsius, 0 degree Fahrenheit. Freeze for at least 48 hours, and adults, larvae, and eggs are all killed at once. As long as the rice has not clumped, molded, or developed a rancid smell, it is perfectly safe to eat after treatment. Beyond freezing, there are a few practical tips for everyday life. First, store in airtight containers. Keep rice in glass jars with sealed lids or thick plastic buckets to block out external adult weevils. Adult weevils can chew through paper and thin plastic bags, but they cannot get through glass or thick plastic. Second, control humidity. Rice weevil reproduction drops sharply in environments with humidity below 50%. If you live in the southern states, place a desiccant packet or a few pieces of clean charcoal in the rice bin to absorb excess moisture. Third, inspect regularly. Once a month, open the rice bin and check. If you see small black bugs crawling around or notice an unusual amount of fine dust on the grain surface, it is likely the weevils have started breeding. If you catch it early, freeze it immediately, and you will not suffer any significant loss. If your rice storage environment follows these 3 steps, rice weevils will generally leave you alone. They like open bags, warm humid cabinets, and corners you do not pay attention to. Get your environment right, and they will not come. Here is a piece of trivia that might surprise many Americans. Rice weevils are not rare in the United States at all. They are a global stored grain pest from Asia to Africa to the Americas. Wherever rice grows, they are there. The USDA's Stored Grain Pest Database shows that in southern states, the occurrence rate of rice weevils in household grain stores is about 5% to 15%, with higher rates in summer. USDA research shows that under proper storage conditions, airtight containers, plus low temperature and low humidity, the shelf life of rice can be extended indefinitely, and rice weevils simply cannot survive. The problem is that most households leave their rice bags open in cabinets, with temperature and humidity perfect for breeding, so of course the weevils come. So remember this one sentence: sealing is 100 times more important than sunning. And freezing is 100 times smarter than throwing away. What is truly dangerous is moldy rice aflatoxin, which is dozens of times more toxic than arsenic and cannot be destroyed by normal cooking. That kind of rice, whether it has bugs or not, should be thrown out immediately. All right, having covered the bugs in your kitchen, let us talk about something you might be eating right now at your dinner table. Your favorite salmon sashimi is not only a century-long marketing hoax, but also a product of technology and industrial shortcuts. What you think you are eating is a fish swimming freely in the deep ocean. But the vast majority of salmon on the market comes from densely packed offshore aquaculture pens. Take Chile, the world's second-largest salmon producer. In 2022, for every ton of farmed salmon produced, 320 grams of antibiotics were used. In Norway, that number was just 0.17 grams. The gap is nearly 2,000 times. Let me break down where the 2,000-fold difference comes from. Norway's salmon farming industry started in the 1980s. After decades of technological iteration, they now have full vaccine coverage, scientifically controlled stocking densities, and real-time seawater quality monitoring. Norway's antibiotic use in farmed salmon has dropped from several hundred grams per ton around 2,000 to 0.17 grams today, a reduction of over 99%. This was not luck, it was the result of decades of sustained investment in research and regulation. And Chile's salmon farming industry started later than Norway's, but expanded faster. The fjords of southern Chile have moderate water temperatures and clear water, which seem like the perfect environment. But the problem is fjord water has poor flow. Norway's pens are in the open North Sea, where strong tidal currents quickly flush away waste and pathogens. Chile's fjords are like sealed swimming pools. Pathogens circulate repeatedly and build up concentration. Under these conditions, once fish get sick, the disease spreads to adjacent pens at lightning speed. Antibiotics become the only rapid solution. Chilean farmed salmon uses 320 grams of antibiotics per ton, not because farmers want to use them, but because if they do not, every fish in the pen will die. In 2021, Chile's official report said antibiotic use had dropped to 320 grams, down 31.9% from the previous year. That figure itself shows that Chile's regulators are pushing for reform. But the problem remains. 320 grams is still nearly 2,000 times Norway's usage. That is a simple factual comparison, and viewers can judge for themselves. Beyond antibiotics, the environmental pollution from farmed salmon is also worth attention. Fish feces, food waste, and chemicals build up on the seabed beneath the pens, forming a layer of organic sediment several centimeters thick. When this sediment decomposes, it consumes large amounts of oxygen, causing seabed hypoxia and mass die-offs of benthic organisms. A 2019 study showed that organic carbon levels in sediment samples from beneath Chilean fjord farms were 4 to 6 times higher than in surrounding natural seabeds. In other words, farmed salmon does not just affect the fish themselves, it is also changing the ecological environment of the surrounding sea. Now look at the color. That appetizing orange-red hue is not natural either. Wild salmon eat krill and accumulate natural astaxanthin, which gives their flesh that color. Farmed salmon, without astaxanthin added to their feed, would have gray-white flesh. Farms add synthetic astaxanthin to the feed, precisely adjusting the color to match what the market likes best. So how do you avoid buying problematic farmed salmon? The simplest way is to check the origin and label. In U.S. supermarkets, real wild salmon is usually labeled Alaskan sockeye salmon or wild-caught Pacific salmon. If the label says Atlantic salmon, it is 100% farmed because wild Atlantic salmon populations are endangered and commercial fishing is strictly restricted. Also look at the fat marbling. Wild salmon has firmer flesh with thin, sparse fat lines and tends toward a deeper orange-red. Farmed salmon has thick, dense fat lines and a lighter orange-red color because the synthetic astaxanthin differs in concentration from the natural version. The most authoritative method USDA regulations require all farmed salmon to be labeled farm-raised or aquaculture. By law, the label must clearly state whether it is farmed or wild. So when you buy, do not just look at price or appearance, carefully read that small print on the package. The rise of salmon sashimi originated in Norway. Before the 1980s, Japanese people did not eat raw salmon. The salmon in Japanese coastal waters carried parasites, so for centuries it was only eaten grilled, pan-fried, or cured. In 1980, Norway exported 2 tons of farmed salmon to Japan. Then the Norwegian government launched a 10-year marketing campaign called Project Japan, promoting salmon sashimi to the Japanese market. They offered free supplies to high-end hotels, invited Japanese chefs to visit farms, and bought out advertising slots. 20 years later, Norway's salmon exports to Japan had grown to over 45,000 tons. Salmon sushi went from non-existent to one of Japan's most popular sashimi choices. This marketing template was later replicated globally, including in the United States. That neatly arranged, beautiful plate of salmon sashimi you see in the supermarket is the product of a carefully engineered commercial narrative that took half a century to build. And the truth about this fish is completely different from the image that has been packaged for you. At the end of the day, salmon itself is good food. The problem lies in farming density, antibiotic use, and environmental impact. If you can afford it, buy wild Alaskan salmon. If you cannot swing that, then remember one principle: do not eat it raw. Farmed salmon should always be cooked thoroughly before eating. Alright, let us step back and look at these stories together. Ticks suck blood, spread disease, rewrite your immune system. Their skill tree is maxed out in stealth, patience, and destruction. Giant African snails devour your garden, contaminate your ground with parasite-laden slime, and catch you off guard. Their talents are eating, breeding, and spreading. Tongue-eating lice enter through the gills, eat the tongue, and become the tongue themselves. Their evolutionary strategy is to replace a host organ and live there permanently. Rice weevils bore holes in grain hulls, hide their eggs inside, and drive you up the wall. But they also have their flip side. They're proof that the rice is good. Salmon dosed with drugs, colored with additives, and packaged as a premium ingredient. The fish itself did nothing wrong. None of these invisible killers are the villains you imagine them to be. They are only doing what evolution taught them to do: eat, live, reproduce, die. A tick does not feel frustrated if it does not get your blood. A snail does not feel proud for eating your vegetables. They have no malicious intent, no moral choice. They just live by the rules. The reason we find them deadly, scary, or disgusting is simply because our living radius overlaps with theirs. We want our world clean and sterile, but the Earth was never designed as a sterile room for humans alone. There are over 8 million species on this planet, and humans are only one of them. The reason we stand at the top of the food chain is not because of our claws or fangs, but because of our brains. Understanding them does not mean turning into a nervous wreck, checking everything with paranoia. It means knowing I live here, and they live here too. As long as we pay a little attention and learn a little, We can live side by side without disturbing each other.